The candlelight caught the facets of my engagement ring as I reached for the challah, and I watched David's mother's eyes narrow with that particular brand of disapproval I'd come to recognize over the past 6 months. She said something in rapid Hebrew to David, her tone making it clear she wasn't complimenting my choice of dress for Shabbat dinner. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. David laughed, that easy, dismissive laugh I'd been hearing more often lately. He responded in Hebrew, gesturing toward me with his wine glass, and suddenly his father, his brother Eli, and his sister-in-law Rachel were all chuckling too. The only person not laughing was David's grandmother, Savta Miriam, who sat at the far end of the table watching me with those sharp, all-knowing eyes. "What's so funny?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay light and curious rather than hurt. I was good at that. The accommodating girlfriend, now fiancé, always willing to be the outsider looking in. "Nothing, babe," David said, switching back to English with that patronizing gentleness that made my skin crawl. "My mom was just saying how American your style is." American wasn't the word his mother had used. I'd been taking private Hebrew lessons for 4 months now, lessons David didn't know about, and I'd caught enough to understand that the actual word was BSYSI, basic, followed by something about costume jewelry and no real taste. The irony was so profound I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. "Oh," I said softly, looking down at my plate. "I'm sorry if my outfit isn't appropriate." "It's fine," David's mother Leah said in heavily accented English, "is just different. In Tel Aviv, women dress with more, how you say, sophistication." I nodded, playing the part I'd perfected over 6 months of Friday night dinners, the quiet American girl who'd somehow captured their golden boy's attention. David worked in tech, developing some app I'd never fully understood, and his family treated him like he'd invented the internet itself. When he'd proposed 3 months ago, his mother had actually cried. Not from joy, but from what I'd understood to be disappointment that he was settling down with someone so ordinary. If only they knew. "Naomi," David's father, Avi, said, his English better than his wife's. "David tells us you work with your hands. You make crafts?" The word crafts landed like a dismissal. I watched David, waiting to see if he'd correct his father, if he'd tell them the truth about what I actually did. But he just reached for more brisket, avoiding my eyes. "I make jewelry," I said simply. "Ah, jewelry." Leah brightened slightly. "Like beads?" "My neighbor, she does this too. Sells at the market on Dizengoff." "Something like that," I murmured. Rachel, Eli's wife, leaned forward. She was the only one who'd ever shown me genuine warmth, though I suspected it was more about having another woman at these dinners than actual friendship. "That's lovely, Naomi. Do you have a shop?" "I mostly work through commissions," I said carefully. "Private clients." David snorted softly, and I saw him exchange a look with Eli. More Hebrew followed, low and quick. I caught the words STVDN tight amnivt, art student, and MTSHike. Funny, amusing. They thought I was playing at being an artist. They thought I spent my days threading beads onto wire in my small studio apartment in Brooklyn, maybe selling pieces on Etsy for $50 each. David had certainly never bothered to correct that impression, even though he'd been to my studio exactly once, seen my workstation, my tools, the raw materials I kept locked in a fireproof safe. But then again, David had never asked many questions. He liked the idea of me more than the reality, the pretty, accommodating girlfriend who didn't challenge him, who fit quietly into the margins of his busy life. When we'd met at a coffee shop in Manhattan 18 months ago, I'd been dressed down, sketching in my notebook during a rare afternoon off. He'd assumed I was a student, and I'd been so tired of men who became interested only after they learned about my work, my success, my connections, that I'd just let him assume. One coffee date had turned into two, then dinner, then a relationship. And somewhere along the way, it became easier to just be Naomi the jewelry hobbyist rather than Naomi Chen, the designer whose pieces had been featured in Vogue, whose custom work was worn by 3 different members of the Israeli Knesset, whose upcoming collection would debut at Tel Aviv Fashion Week in exactly 2 weeks. Tel Aviv Fashion Week, where I'd been invited as one of 12 international designers, where my collection, Sabra, inspired by the Hebrew word for a native-born Israeli, prickly on the outside, sweet within, would showcase 18 months of intensive work, research, and collaboration with Israeli artisans, where the exhibition would be held at the old Tel Aviv port, with press coverage from Haaretz, Winnet, and at least a dozen international fashion publications, where David's entire family would be in attendance because Leah had mentioned just last week that they'd bought tickets to the opening night gala, because it was the social event of the season, because being seen there mattered to them. They just didn't know they'd be seeing me. Naomi makes cute little things, David said now, his hand finding mine under the table. Maybe one day she'll have her own Etsy shop. Right, babe? I squeezed his hand back, my smile never wavering. Maybe. Savta Miriam made a sound, something between a cough and a laugh. When I looked at her, she was watching me with those penetrating eyes, a small smile playing at her lips. Unlike everyone else at the table, Savta Miriam had been born in Brooklyn, had moved to Israel as a young woman, and had never fully lost her American directness. She spoke less than everyone else, but when she did, people listened. She said something in Hebrew now, sharp and clear, and the entire table fell silent. What did she say? I asked. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. David shifted uncomfortably. She said you have good eyes, that she sees intelligence in them. That wasn't quite what she'd said. My Hebrew was good enough now to know she'd actually said, "That girl understands every word we're saying, and she's smarter than all of you combined." But I just smiled at Savta Miriam and said, "Thank you, that's very kind." The dinner continued, the conversation flowing back into Hebrew more often than not. They discussed David's work, Eli's upcoming promotion, Rachel's pregnancy, neighborhood gossip I couldn't follow. I ate quietly, performing the role of the outsider, the American girlfriend who was trying so hard to fit in, but never quite would. Inside, I was thinking about the final fitting I had scheduled for Monday. My centerpiece, a collar necklace that incorporated ancient Jewish wedding ring designs with modern industrial elements, hammered steel interwoven with delicate gold filigree and studded with conflict-free diamonds from the Negev. It had taken me 3 months to get the balance right. Working with a metalsmith in Jaffa who'd been skeptical of my vision until he saw the preliminary designs. The piece would be modeled by Yael Shelef, one of Israel's top runway models, who'd specifically requested to wear my collection after seeing my preliminary sketches. Yael, who was sitting 2 tables away from us right now at a restaurant on the Upper West Side, finalizing details for Fashion Week with her team. Yael, who had no idea that the designer she'd been corresponding with via email was the quiet woman being mocked in Hebrew at a Shabbat dinner. "Naomi," Leah said, pulling me from my thoughts. "David says you don't have family? No one is coming to the wedding?" The wedding. Right. The wedding that was scheduled for next June, a year away, plenty of time to plan. Or so I'd thought, before Leah had taken over completely. Booking a venue in Tel Aviv without consulting me, hiring a wedding planner who called me David's American girl and seemed to think my role was simply to show up and look presentable. My parents passed away when I was young, I said, the words coming automatically now. I'd been raised by my grandmother in San Francisco, in a small apartment filled with her jade collection and the smell of jasmine tea. She'd died my senior year of college, leaving me alone in the world, but with enough inheritance to fund my first real studio and the connections I'd needed to get my early work into galleries. Ah, Leah said, and I couldn't tell if her expression was sympathy or satisfaction. So sad. Well, David's family will be your family now. The promise felt more like a threat. After dinner, the men retreated to the living room while Rachel and I were expected to help clear the table. Leah didn't ask. She simply started collecting plates and nodded toward the kitchen. I followed, playing the dutiful future daughter-in-law, even as I mentally reviewed the email I'd received that morning from the Fashion Week coordinators. "Don't take it personally," Rachel said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher. "Leah's like this with everyone. She still doesn't think I'm good enough for Eli, and we've been married 5 years." "Does she know you speak Hebrew?" I asked. Rachel looked startled. "Of course, I converted. Learned the language, the customs, everything." "And she still doesn't think you're good enough?" "Some people can never be pleased," Rachel said with a shrug. "But you get used to it. David loves you. That's what matters." Did he? I'd been asking myself that question more and more lately. David loved the idea of me, the quiet, undemanding girlfriend who didn't compete with him, who made him feel accomplished and successful by comparison. But did he love Naomi Chen, the woman who'd spent the last decade building a career that had taken her to Paris, Milan, Mumbai, and Tokyo? Did he love the woman who'd been profiled in the New York Times style section, whose work was in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art? He didn't even know that woman existed. "Rachel," I said carefully, "has David ever mentioned what I actually do? Like, specifically?" She frowned. "He said you make jewelry. Pretty pieces, handmade. Why?" "Just wondering." The sound of laughter from the living room drifted into the kitchen. More Hebrew, more jokes I wasn't meant to fully understand. David's voice rose above the others, animated and happy in a way he rarely was when we were alone. This was where he came alive, with his family, in his language, in the culture I would always be outside of, unless I showed them exactly who I was. The thought had been building for weeks now, crystallizing into a plan I wasn't entirely proud of, but couldn't seem to abandon. I'd tried to talk to David about my work, about the Fashion Week invitation, about the reality of who I was and what I did. But every time I'd started, he'd either been distracted by his phone or had made some dismissive comment about hobby projects that made me close up again. So instead, I'd said nothing. I'd accepted the Fashion Week invitation. I'd finalized my collection. I'd arranged every detail of the showcase, working with the coordinators to ensure my presentation would be one of the highlights of opening night. And I'd told no one, not David, not his family, not the few friends I had left in New York who still thought I was just a struggling artist making ends meet. In 2 weeks, they would all find out the truth. "Naomi?" David called from the living room. "Come say goodbye to everyone. I need to get home. Early meeting tomorrow." I dried my hands and walked into the living room, where the family was gathered near the door. Leah kissed my cheeks with the perfunctory warmth she'd perfected. Avi shook my hand formally, and Eli barely acknowledged me. Rachel gave me a genuine hug and whispered, "Hang in there." Savta Miriam was the last. She pulled me down to her level and kissed both my cheeks, then held my face between her weathered hands. In clear, unaccented English, she said, "Don't let them make you small, child. You were meant for bigger things." I blinked, startled. Before I could respond, she'd released me and turned away, leaving me wondering how much she actually knew. The cab ride back to Manhattan was quiet. David scrolled through his phone, occasionally laughing at something and showing me memes I didn't understand, or responding to messages in Hebrew. I watched the city lights blur past the window, thinking about the collar necklace, about the runway, about the moment when his family would see my name in the program. "Hey," David said suddenly, putting his phone away. "I'm sorry about tonight. My mom, she can be a lot. It's okay. She just wants the best for me, for us." He took my hand, and I noticed again how he never really looked at my ring, the one he'd chosen himself from a chain jewelry store, a simple solitaire that cost maybe $2,000. Pretty enough, conventional enough, exactly what you'd give to the quiet girlfriend who made craft jewelry as a hobby. My own work started at $15,000 for simple pieces. My average commission was somewhere around $40,000. The collar necklace alone was valued at over $200,000 between the materials, the craftsmanship, and my name. "David," I said carefully, "do you ever wonder what I actually do all day, when you're at work and I'm in my studio?" He smiled indulgently. "You make your jewelry, you work on your pieces, maybe meet with your crafting friends?" "My crafting friends?" "Yeah. I think it's great that you have a hobby you're passionate about. Not everyone needs to have some high-powered career. Some people just create for the joy of it." There it was, the fundamental misunderstanding that had been the foundation of our entire relationship. David had never asked because he'd already decided who I was, and I'd let him, too tired and too wary of men who wanted me for my success to correct his assumptions. "What if I told you," I said slowly, "that I'm not just a hobbyist? That I'm actually—" "Babe," he interrupted, his attention already back on his phone. "Can we not do this tonight? I'm exhausted, and I have that meeting at 8. We can talk about your jewelry stuff this weekend, okay?" I closed my mouth and turned back to the window. In 2 weeks, we wouldn't need to talk about it at all. The cab dropped David off first at his apartment in the East Village. He'd wanted to keep our own places until we were married. Something about maintaining independence that I'd initially appreciated, but now recognized as his way of keeping me compartmentalized. Then the driver took me to my place in Dumbo, a converted warehouse loft that I'd bought 3 years ago when the area was still transitioning. As soon as I was inside, I dropped the persona like a heavy coat. I kicked off the modest heels I'd worn to dinner, unzipped the simple dress Leah had deemed too American, and walked to my real workspace. The studio took up the entire back half of my loft, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the East River and the Manhattan skyline beyond. My workbenches were covered with tools, sketches, and works in progress. Locked cabinets held precious metals and stones. A fireproof safe contained my most valuable materials and finished pieces waiting for client pickup. On the main workbench, under protective cloth, lay 3 pieces from my Fashion Week collection. I pulled back the cloth and turned on the overhead lights, studying them with a critical eye. The first was a cuff bracelet that incorporated ancient Hebrew letters with modern geometric patterns, each letter spelling out words of power, strength, wisdom, courage, in a design that was both traditional and boldly contemporary. The second was a pair of earrings that echoed the architecture of Jerusalem's old city, with tiny arches and stones that caught the light like the golden glow of Jerusalem limestone at sunset. The third was a brooch designed to look like a sabra cactus flower. Delicate and beautiful, with sharp edges that could draw blood if handled carelessly. These 3 pieces would be displayed on individual pedestals as part of the exhibition. The rest of the collection, 12 more pieces, including the collar necklace, would be worn by models during the runway show. Each piece told a story about Israeli identity, about the tension between ancient and modern, soft and hard, welcoming and defensive. I'd spent 6 months researching in secret, making 2 trips to Israel that David thought were girls' weekends with friends I'd invented. I'd met with historians, studied artifacts in museums, worked with artisans in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Jaffa. I'd walked the streets of the old city at dawn, sat in cafes in Florentin, watched the sunset from the Tel Aviv port, where my work would soon be displayed. And through it all, I'd been treated like an outsider by the man I was supposed to marry, and his family who thought I was too basic, too American, too unsophisticated to understand real culture. My phone buzzed with a message from Yael Shalef. Final fitting confirmed for Monday, 2 p.m. Can't wait to see the complete collection. This is going to be incredible. Another message came through, this one from the Fashion Week coordinator. Press list finalized. We have confirmed attendance from Haaretz, Ynet, Jerusalem Post, Vogue, Elle, and at least 15 international publications. Your showcase is already generating significant buzz. The preview images you sent are causing quite a stir in the fashion community. I smiled, pouring myself a glass of wine, not the sweet Manischewitz from dinner, but a nice California Cabernet from a winery my grandmother had loved. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up the Fashion Week website where designers' names were listed alphabetically. There it was, between a French couture designer and a Japanese minimalist. Naomi Chen, jewelry design, New York or San Francisco. No mention of being engaged to David Levinson. No mention of the quiet Friday night dinners or the patient acceptance of casual dismissal. Just my name, my work, and the life I'd built entirely on my own terms. The opening night gala was in exactly 14 days. Leah had mentioned buying tickets months ago, splurging on the premium package that included cocktails, runway seating, and access to the post-show exhibition. She'd invited her entire social circle, turning it into a major event for their community. David had been only mildly interested until his mother made it clear that attendance was mandatory. I'd seen the guest list. The Levinson family had purchased 8 tickets, premium seats, 5th row center. They would have a perfect view of everything. My phone rang and I saw David's name flash on the screen. I considered not answering, but old habits died hard. Hey, I said. Hey, babe, I'm home. Just wanted to say goodnight and, sorry again about dinner. My mom means well. David, what exactly did your mother say about my jewelry? Before dinner, when I walked in? He was quiet for a moment. Why? You didn't understand it anyway. Humor me. Another pause. She said your necklace looked like something from a souvenir shop, that it was basic. But she doesn't understand American fashion, you know? She's very Tel Aviv chic. And what did you say? I defended you, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I said you have your own style. Your own style, meaning poor taste. I got it. Look, David continued, I know fitting in with my family is hard, but you have to understand, they're used to a certain level of sophistication. Tel Aviv is one of the fashion capitals of the world. My mom's friends are all very stylish, very cultured. They just want to make sure I'm with someone who can keep up. Keep up. As if I were somehow trailing behind, struggling to match their elegance. And you think I can't keep up? I asked quietly. That's not what I said. I just think, maybe you could try a little harder? Like, maybe invest in some nicer pieces? There are some great jewelry stores in the Diamond District. I could help you pick out something more sophisticated for the wedding. He wanted to take me jewelry shopping, to help me develop better taste. The man who knew nothing about design, about craftsmanship, about the difference between fashion and art, wanted to educate me on jewelry. That's very thoughtful, I managed to say. I'll think about it. Great. Okay, I really need to sleep. Love you. Love you too. I said automatically, but he'd already hung up. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my collection, thinking about the months of work, the research, the passion I'd poured into these pieces. Thinking about every Friday night dinner where I'd bitten my tongue, every dismissive comment I'd absorbed, every time I'd made myself smaller to fit into the space David and his family had allotted me. Not anymore. I opened my email and found the message from the Fashion Week publicity team, the one asking if I wanted to do any pre-event press. I'd declined before, preferring to let my work speak for itself. But now I hit reply and typed, "I've reconsidered. I'm available for interviews. Please send any media requests my way." The response came back within minutes. "Fantastic. We have 3 interview requests already. Haaretz wants to do a profile piece. Ynet wants to include you in their 12 Designers to Watch feature. And Vogue is interested in a video interview about your creative process. Would you be available this week?" I smiled and confirmed all 3 interviews. Over the next week, I lived a double life more completely than I ever had before. During the day, I was Naomi Chen, internationally recognized jewelry designer. I gave interviews to fashion journalists who asked intelligent questions about my inspirations, my techniques, my vision for modern Israeli-inspired design. I worked with Yael and the other models, perfecting the way each piece would be worn, ensuring every detail was exactly right. I attended production meetings, reviewed lighting plans, and signed off on the exhibition layout. At night, I was David's quiet girlfriend. I attended another Friday night dinner where Leah complained about my inappropriate pantsuit, not knowing it was Stella McCartney, purchased at a sample sale where I'd been invited as a VIP. I smiled through David's jokes about my craft projects and nodded sympathetically when he complained about work stress. I played the role so well that I almost forgot it wasn't real. Almost. The Haaretz profile ran 5 days before Fashion Week. The journalist, a woman named Tamar who'd studied jewelry design herself before becoming a writer, had been fascinated by my integration of traditional Jewish motifs with contemporary design. She'd asked about my process, my inspirations, my thoughts on representing Israeli culture as an outsider. "But are you really an outsider?" she'd asked. "Your work shows such deep understanding, such respect for the culture. And I understand you're engaged to an Israeli man?" I'd been careful in my response. "I'm engaged, yes. But I prefer to keep my personal life separate from my work. This collection isn't about my relationship. It's about my own journey of understanding and appreciating Israeli culture and Jewish identity through design." The article was beautiful, thoughtful, and accompanied by stunning photographs of 3 pieces from my collection. It ran on the front page of the art section, with a teaser on the main page. "American designer brings fresh perspective to Israeli identity through bold jewelry collection." David didn't read Haaretz. Neither did most of his family, preferring the more sensationalist Ynet or the English-language Jerusalem Post. But some people did, and I knew word would spread. It started with a message from Rachel. "Naomi, did you see this article? Is this you?" I'd been expecting that message. Rachel was the only one who might actually read the art section, who might recognize my work from the photos. "Yes," I replied simply. "Holy shit. Holy shit. Does David know?" "Not yet." "Naomi, this is huge. Fashion Week is in 4 days. They bought tickets. They're all going." "I know." 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her next message came through. "This is going to be insane. I mean, I'm here for it, but this is going to be insane." I smiled and didn't respond. 2 days before Fashion Week, the Vogue video interview went live. It was a longer piece, 12 minutes of me discussing my collection, showing some of my process, talking about the research I'd done in Israel. The interviewer had asked about my engagement ring, clearly noticing the contrast between the simple solitaire and the elaborate pieces I created. "This was a gift from my fiancé," I'd said, holding up my hand. "It represents his taste, his choice, but my work represents mine." The video ended with a shot of the collar necklace, displayed against black velvet, every detail sharp and clear. The caption read, "Naomi Chen's Sabra collection debuts at Tel Aviv Fashion Week opening night, March 14th. Don't miss it." That video got 300,000 views in the first 24 hours. David called me that evening, his voice tight. "Babe, my mom's friend just sent her a video. Is this you?" Here we go, I thought. "Yes," I said calmly. "That's me." Silence. Then, "You're in Vogue? You're showing at Fashion Week?" "Yes." But you said you make jewelry as a hobby. You said you work with private clients. You never said—" "You never asked," I interrupted gently. "David, you never once asked me about the details of my work. You decided what I did, and I let you believe it." "You let me believe." "Naomi, what the hell? This is insane. You're famous? You're like actually famous?" "I'm successful in my field, yes." "Your field? Jesus Christ. My mom is freaking out. She's calling everyone she knows. They all bought tickets to this thing, and now you're going to be there? As a designer? One of the designers?" "I tried to tell you," I said, which wasn't entirely true, but also wasn't entirely false. "Multiple times. You weren't interested in the details." "I wasn't. Naomi, you don't hide something like this. You don't just casually forget to mention that you're a successful jewelry designer who shows at Fashion Week." "I didn't forget. You assumed, and I stopped correcting you." Another long silence. "Is this why you've been acting weird? Is this some kind of revenge thing because my family teased you?" "Teased. That's what he called it." "No," I said honestly. "I accepted the Fashion Week invitation 6 months ago, long before most of those dinners. This isn't about revenge. It's about finally being honest about who I am." "Who you are?" "Right. So who the hell are you, Naomi? Because the person I thought I knew apparently doesn't exist." "That person never existed, David. You created her in your mind, and I was too tired to fight against it. But this work, this collection, this career, this is who I've always been. This is who I was before I met you, and who I'll be after." "After? What's that supposed to mean?" I looked around my studio, at the life I'd built, at the collection that would debut in 2 days. "It means we should probably talk. Really talk. After the show." "After the show?" he repeated. "Right. Because that won't be humiliating at all. Having my entire family find out that my supposedly struggling artist girlfriend is actually some big-shot designer they've been mocking for months. I imagine it will be quite educational for everyone involved," I said. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the quiet of my studio and felt lighter. The secret was out, or at least beginning to spill into the open. In 2 days, it would be completely revealed. David's family would attend Fashion Week expecting a pleasant evening of culture and fashion. Instead, they would watch me, basic, unsophisticated, American me, present a collection that had already generated buzz in international fashion circles. They would see my name in the program. They would watch my pieces on the runway. They would read my bio, see my credentials, understand exactly who they'd been dismissing at Friday night dinners. And David would have to decide if he could love the real me, or if he'd only ever loved the diminished version he'd created. My phone buzzed with another message from Rachel. "So I just got off the phone with Leah. She's in crisis mode, half angry, half impressed, fully confused. This is the most dramatic thing to happen to this family since Eli's first wife left him for the yoga instructor." I laughed despite myself and typed back, "Should I be worried? Honestly, I think you're about to become either the family hero or the family villain. No in between. But Naomi? That collar necklace in the video? It's stunning. Absolutely stunning. I'm proud of you for not staying small." That message meant more than she probably knew. I'd spent so long making myself fit into spaces that weren't designed for me, bending and compressing until I almost forgot my own shape. But art doesn't bend. Creation doesn't compress. You either honor it or you destroy it. And I'd finally chosen honor. The next day was a blur of final preparations. I met with the Fashion Week team to review the runway lineup, confirmed that all 15 pieces had arrived safely and were secured in the Fashion Week vault, and did a final walkthrough of the exhibition space where the non-runway pieces would be displayed. The coordinator, a sharp woman named Dahlia, pulled me aside. "I've been doing this for 15 years, she said, "and I have to tell you, your collection is generating more pre-show buzz than anything we've had in the last 5 years. The waiting list for tickets is over 300 people. We're getting calls from collectors asking about purchase options. This is going to be huge for you." "Thank you," I said. "I just hope the work speaks for itself." "Oh, it does. Trust me, it does." That evening, I received a delivery at my apartment, a massive bouquet of flowers with a card that read, "To the woman I never really knew. Let's fix that. D." It was a start. Not enough, not yet, but a start. I called him. "Thank you for the flowers." "Naomi," he said, and his voice was different, uncertain, humbled. "I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I should have asked. I should have been interested. I should have seen you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. Can we, can we talk after the show? Really talk?" "Yes." "But David, you need to know that I'm not going to apologize for who I am or what I've achieved. I'm not going to make myself smaller to make you more comfortable." "I don't want you to," he said, and I almost believed him. "I want to know the real you. All of it. Even the parts that are more successful than you, even the parts that don't need you." He was quiet for a moment. "Especially those parts." We agreed to meet for dinner the night after Fashion Week. Just the two of us. No family, no distractions. A real conversation about whether we had a real future. But first, I had a show to put on. The night before opening night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Savta Miriam's words. "Don't let them make you small." She'd known somehow, had seen past the role I was playing to the person underneath. I wondered if she'd read the articles, seen the videos, put the pieces together. I wondered if she'd be proud. At 5 in the morning, unable to sleep, I went to my studio and stood before my collection one last time before it would leave for the venue. Each piece represented hours of work, of research, of pouring myself into metal and stone. They were my truest self, made tangible. "Tomorrow," I said to the empty room, "everyone will know." And I was ready. Opening night of Tel Aviv Fashion Week arrived with the kind of perfect Mediterranean weather that felt almost scripted. Warm sunshine giving way to a golden sunset as guests began arriving at the old Tel Aviv port. I watched from backstage as the crowd filed in, champagne glasses in hand, the air buzzing with excitement and the rapid-fire Hebrew conversations of Israel's fashion elite. I'd arrived 3 hours early for final preparations, my hands steady as I helped the models into their pieces, adjusted clasps, ensured every angle was perfect. Yael stood before me now wearing the collar necklace, and even in the harsh backstage lighting it was breathtaking. "Naomi," she said, turning to catch my eye in the mirror, "this is a masterpiece. I've worn jewelry from Cartier, Bulgari, Tiffany. This rivals all of them." "Thank you," I said, making a final adjustment to ensure the piece sat perfectly against her collarbone. The hammered steel caught the light, the gold filigree seeming to float above it, the Negev diamonds throwing tiny rainbows across her skin. My phone buzzed. Rachel. We just arrived. Leah is dressed. Like, full Tel Aviv socialite mode, she has no idea. This is going to be legendary. I smiled and tucked my phone away. Through a gap in the curtain, I could see the Levinson family being escorted to their seats. Fifth row center, just as I'd known. Leah wore a stunning designer dress, probably Eli Saab, her hair perfectly styled. Avi looked distinguished in a dark suit. Eli and Rachel were together, Rachel catching my eye and giving me a subtle thumbs up. Savta Miriam walked slowly, aided by a cane, her sharp eyes already scanning the venue with interest. And David. David looked nervous, his eyes darting around, fidgeting with his program. He'd tried to call me 6 times today. I'd ignored all of them. Dahlia appeared at my elbow. 5 minutes. The press is seated. The VIPs are in place. And your collection is closing the first half of the show. Are you ready? Was I ready? I'd been ready for 6 months, for 18 months, for my entire life. I'm ready. The lights dimmed and the show began. I watched from the wings as other designers' collections strutted down the runway. Beautiful work, innovative designs, each one receiving enthusiastic applause. The audience was engaged, appreciative, exactly the kind of crowd that understood fashion as art. Then came the announcement I'd been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer said in Hebrew, then repeated in English, we now present the work of Naomi Chen, internationally acclaimed jewelry designer from New York and San Francisco. Her collection, Sabra, explores the duality of Israeli identity, the protective exterior and the sweet interior, through the lens of Jewish historical motifs reimagined for contemporary design. The lights shifted to a deep blue, and the music changed to something that incorporated traditional Middle Eastern instruments with modern electronic beats. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Yael stepped out first, wearing the collar necklace with a simple black dress that let the piece command all attention. The gasp from the audience was audible. She walked with perfect confidence, the necklace catching every light, every camera flash. When she reached the end of the runway and paused, turning slowly, I heard someone whisper loudly in Hebrew, "That's extraordinary." I couldn't see the Levinson family's faces from my angle, but I could imagine them. Still not understanding, probably. Still not connecting the designer's name to the quiet girlfriend they'd mocked. The next model wore the cuff bracelet, the Hebrew letters seeming to glow against her skin. Then the earrings, catching light like Jerusalem itself. Piece after piece, my collection walked down that runway, and with each one, the audience's response grew more enthusiastic. The final runway piece was a ring I'd designed to look like the walls of the old city, circular, protective, ancient yet eternal. The model wore it on her index finger, her hand raised as she walked, letting everyone see the intricate detail work. When the last model disappeared backstage, there was a moment of silence. Then the applause began. Not polite, not merely appreciative, but thunderous. People stood. I saw camera flashes, heard voices calling out in Hebrew and English, asking questions, demanding to know more. Dahlia grabbed my arm. "That's your cue. Go." I stepped out onto the runway, and for a moment, the lights were so bright I couldn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw them. The entire Fashion Week audience on their feet, applauding. Press cameras turning toward me. And in the 5th row, the Levinson family, frozen in their seats like a photograph. Leah's mouth was literally open. Avi had dropped his program. Eli looked like he'd been slapped. Rachel was grinning and clapping enthusiastically, the only one who seemed thrilled. Savta Miriam was nodding slowly, that knowing smile on her face again. And David. David was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Which, in a way, he hadn't. I walked the length of the runway in the simple black dress I'd chosen specifically for this moment. Elegant, professional, unadorned, except for one piece of my own jewelry. A delicate chain with a tiny pendant in the shape of a sabra flower. Nothing basic, nothing unsophisticated, nothing that suggested I needed anyone's help to understand fashion or culture or art. When I reached the end of the runway, I paused as the models had, turning slowly to let everyone see me, not hiding, not diminishing, just being exactly who I was. The announcer spoke again. Naomi Chen, whose work has been featured in the Museum of Modern Art's permanent collection, whose pieces have been worn by celebrities and dignitaries worldwide, and whose innovative designs have earned her recognition as one of the most influential jewelry designers of her generation. I bowed slightly, thanked the audience with a nod, and walked back down the runway. As I passed the fifth row, I let my eyes meet Leah's for just a moment. Her expression was beyond description. Shock, disbelief, horror, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of respect. Backstage was chaos. Press wanted interviews. Buyers wanted to discuss pieces. Other designers wanted to congratulate me. Dahlia was fielding offers, taking names, organizing the madness. Yael hugged me, careful not to disturb the collar necklace she was still wearing. "That was perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect. I've already had 3 people ask me where they can commission pieces." My phone was exploding with notifications. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, former clients, fashion bloggers, journalists, and buried in all of it, messages from the Levinson family. "David, we need to talk, now." "Leah, I don't understand. How is this possible?" "Eli, did you know about this?" Sent to the family group chat I was in but rarely participated in. "Rachel, you are my hero. Coffee tomorrow?" And Savta Miriam, who somehow had my number even though I'd never given it to her. "I told them you were smart. Come visit me this week, child. We should talk." I ignored most of them. There would be time for conversations later. Right now, I had a second half of the show to watch, an exhibition to oversee, and a celebration to attend. The exhibition hall opened after the runway show concluded. My 3 non-runway pieces were displayed on individual pedestals under perfect lighting, each with a small placard explaining the inspiration and design process. Already, a crowd had gathered around them, and I could hear the murmur of appreciation and discussion. I stood to the side, watching, listening to fragments of conversation. The detail work is incredible. "I heard she spent 6 months researching in Israel. The way she's integrated traditional Jewish motifs with contemporary design. Did you see the price estimates? Starting at $15,000? A woman in an expensive suit approached the cuff bracelet, studying it intently. She pulled out her phone and made a call, speaking rapidly in Hebrew. I caught enough to understand she was calling her husband, telling him she'd found the perfect anniversary gift, asking him to transfer funds to secure it immediately. Dahlia appeared at my side again. "We have 12 serious purchase inquiries already, and the exhibition's been open for 20 minutes. Naomi, I think you're going to sell out." "Already?" I couldn't quite believe it. "Already. And we have 6 commission requests from people who want custom pieces, including—" She lowered her voice. "Including someone from the Prime Minister's office." I blinked. "The Prime Minister?" "His wife saw the press coverage this morning. She wants to discuss a piece for an upcoming state dinner." This was beyond anything I'd imagined. I'd hoped for good reception, for validation, for the satisfaction of revealing myself to David's family. But this was career-defining. "Naomi." The voice behind me was familiar and unwelcome. I turned to find Leah standing there, Avi beside her. Up close, I could see that her perfect makeup couldn't quite hide the complex emotions playing across her face. "Mrs. Levinson," I said politely. "Mr. Levinson, are you enjoying the exhibition?" "Enjoying." Leah seemed unable to complete the sentence. She switched to Hebrew, speaking rapidly, and I let her finish before responding. "I understood all of that," I said quietly in Hebrew. My accent was American, but the words were correct. "Every word you've said at every dinner, every joke, every dismissal." Her face went pale. Avi put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. "You speak Hebrew?" she managed in English. "I've been taking lessons for months. I wanted to understand the culture better. For my work." I gestured at the exhibition. "And to understand what you really thought of me." "Why didn't you say something?" Avi asked, and at least he had the grace to look embarrassed. "Why did you let us mock me? Dismiss me? Treat me like I was too simple to understand sophistication?" I kept my voice level, professional. "Because I wanted to see who you really were, and you wanted to believe I was less than I am. It was easier for you to look down on David's American girlfriend than to consider that she might be your equal." Leah found her voice, and with it, her defense. "You deceived us. You pretended to be someone you weren't." "No," I corrected gently. "I was always exactly who I am. You decided who I was without asking, and I stopped trying to correct you. There's a difference. The jewelry you wore to our dinners was my own work. Early pieces, simple designs. I thought you might recognize the quality, might ask questions, but you'd already decided it was basic, so you never looked closely enough to see what was really there." Eli appeared then, looking uncomfortable. "Naomi, listen. We didn't know." "That's the point," I said. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You saw what you wanted to see." "And David?" Leah asked sharply. "Does he know? Did you tell him?" "He knows now. He found out 2 days ago." "2 days?" Her voice rose. "You let him come here not knowing? You embarrassed him in front of everyone?" "I embarrassed him?" I felt my calm facade crack slightly. "Mrs. Levinson, with all due respect, your son has spent our entire relationship assuming I was a struggling hobbyist because he never bothered to ask about my actual work. He introduced me to his colleagues as someone who makes cute little things. He offered to take me shopping to improve my taste. Whatever embarrassment he feels now is nothing compared to the embarrassment I've endured at your family dinners for 6 months." "She's right," said a new voice. Savta Miriam had appeared, leaning on her cane, her eyes sharp and clear. She spoke in English, though I knew she could switch to Hebrew whenever she wanted. "You've all been fools. This girl has more talent in her little finger than most people have in their entire body, and you treated her like she was lucky to be tolerated." "Savta," Eli started, but she cut him off with a gesture. "No, I'm old. I can say what I want." She turned to me. "You, Naomi. This collection is beautiful. It shows deep respect for our culture, deep understanding. You are the real thing, and they are the ones who are basic." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Savta Miriam smiled. "Come see me before you leave Israel," she said. "I want to hear your story properly, and I have some pieces from my grandmother you should see. Real jewelry from the old country. Maybe they will inspire you." "I'd be honored," I said sincerely. She nodded and turned to her family. "As for you, all of you, you owe this woman an apology, a real one, not the half-hearted justifications you're working on now." With that, she walked away toward the exhibition, leaving her family standing in awkward silence. Avi spoke first. "Naomi, I apologize. Truly. We made assumptions, and they were wrong." "We were wrong," Leah added, though the words seemed to pain her. "Your work is... it's extraordinary." I can see why you're successful. It wasn't a great apology, but it was something. I nodded acknowledgement. Where's David? I asked. He left, Eli said. Right after your runway walk. He said he needed air. Of course he did. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, press interviews, and business discussions. I sold 7 pieces outright, including the collar necklace for $250,000 to a collector from Dubai. I took on 4 commission requests, each one representing months of future work and substantial income. I gave interviews to 3 major publications and had my photo taken with what felt like every fashion blogger in Israel. By the time the event finally ended around midnight, I was exhausted but exhilarated. I'd done it. I'd shown them exactly who I was, and the world had responded with enthusiasm and respect. Dahlia found me as I was preparing to leave. Naomi, I just want you to know, in 15 years of doing this, I've never seen a response like tonight. You're going to be huge. Bigger than you already are. This is the kind of breakthrough that changes careers. Thank you, I said, for believing in the collection, for giving me this opportunity. Are you kidding? Thank you. You've made this Fashion Week one to remember. As I walked out of the venue, I found Rachel waiting by the entrance. Hey, she said. I know you probably want to be alone, but I thought you might need a friendly face. Thank you, I said, and meant it. That was incredible, truly. And watching Leah's face when you walked out? She grinned. That alone was worth the ticket price. Where's David? Hotel. He's processing. Naomi, I've known David since he married Eli, and I've never seen him like this. He's really shaken. Good, I said, and then felt guilty. That sounds harsh? No, it sounds honest. He needed to be shaken. They all did. She paused. Are you going to talk to him? Eventually, but not tonight. Tonight, I just want to enjoy this. She hugged me. You deserve to enjoy it. You were amazing. Back at my hotel, a boutique place in Tel Aviv, paid for with my own money, not knowing that David and his family were staying at a different hotel across the city, I finally looked at my phone properly. The messages were overwhelming. Notifications from Instagram, Twitter, fashion blogs. The Haaretz article had been updated with photos from tonight. Vogue had already posted a gallery of my collection with the headline, Naomi Chen steals the show at Tel Aviv Fashion Week. And buried in all of it, one message from David. I'm at the Rothschild Hotel, room 412. If you want to talk tonight, I'll be awake. If not, I understand. But Naomi, I'm so sorry. For everything. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to go, to have the conversation, to see if there was anything left to salvage. Part of me wanted to let him sit with his regret, to feel the full weight of what he'd missed by never really seeing me. In the end, I poured myself a glass of wine from the minibar and sat on the balcony, looking out over Tel Aviv's lights. Tomorrow would be soon enough for difficult conversations. Tonight belonged to me and my triumph. I woke the next morning to my phone ringing. David. Hello, I said, my voice rough with sleep. Naomi, thank God. Can we meet? Please? I need to talk to you. I checked the time, 9 a.m. Give me an hour. There's a cafe on Dizengoff near Arlazorov. Meet me there. I'll be there. I took my time getting ready, choosing my clothes carefully. Another simple black dress, elegant but not showy. The Sabra flower pendant again. My armor of authenticity. David was already there when I arrived, looking like he hadn't slept. 2 cups of coffee sat on the table in front of him. I ordered you a cappuccino, he said. I remember you like them. I sat down, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. Thank you. Naomi, He ran his hands through his hair. I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry. For what, specifically? I needed to hear him say it. For not seeing you. For not asking questions. For assuming you were less than you are. For letting my family mock you. For being too absorbed in my own life to care about yours. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. For being a terrible fiancé to an extraordinary woman. You weren't terrible, I said quietly. You were just disinterested. You liked the idea of a girlfriend who was simple, uncomplicated, who didn't challenge you. And I let you believe that because I was tired of men who only wanted me for my success. So we both lied. No, I never lied. I just didn't correct your assumptions. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I looked you up last night. Really looked you up. Naomi, you're famous. You're successful. You're exactly the kind of person I always said I wanted to be with. And I didn't even recognize you because I'd decided you were something else. The question is, I said carefully, can you love the real me? Not the quiet girl who fit into the margins of your life, but the woman who has her own career, her own success, her own identity that has nothing to do with you? He was quiet for a long moment. I want to say yes. I want to believe I can. But honestly, I don't know. Last night, watching you on that runway, seeing everyone applaud you, reading about your achievements, I felt proud, but I also felt small. At least he was honest. I felt like I'd been dating someone famous without knowing it, and now everyone knows. And they're going to look at me like I'm the lucky one, like I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. He looked up at me, and they'd be right. David. No, let me finish. My whole life, I've been the golden boy, the successful one, the one my parents brag about. And I liked that you seemed to need me, to look up to me. But you never needed me, did you? You were always fine on your own. I wanted you, I corrected. That's different from needing you. Is it enough? For you, I mean. Is wanting me enough when you could have anyone? I thought about that. A month ago, I would have said yes. I would have said that wanting someone is the purest form of choosing them. But now I think I need someone who wants to know me, really know me. Someone who asks questions and cares about the answers. Someone who doesn't need me to be smaller so they can feel bigger. I want to be that person, he said desperately. Wanting to be and actually being are different things. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our coffee, watching Tel Aviv wake up around us. What do we do now? He finally asked. I pulled the engagement ring off my finger and set it on the table between us. I think we take a break. A real one. We figure out who we actually are separately, and then we see if those people actually work together. You're ending it. I'm pausing it, I corrected. David, you fell in love with a woman who doesn't exist. I need you to meet the real me, get to know her, and then decide if you actually want to marry her. And I need to figure out if I can be with someone who was so willing to dismiss me. He stared at the ring, not touching it. How long? I don't know. Months, maybe. We can talk occasionally, but no Friday night dinners, no family events, no pretending everything's fine. And if after all that, we realize it's not going to work, then at least we'll have been honest with each other. And ourselves. He finally picked up the ring, turning it in his fingers. For what it's worth, I think you're incredible. I always did, even when I didn't understand what I was seeing. That's a start, I said, but it's not enough. We talked for another hour, sorting through logistics, discussing how to tell his family, figuring out what to do about the wedding venue his mother had booked. It was sad and necessary and strangely relieving. When we finally parted, he hugged me tightly. I hope I get another chance to know you, the real you. I hope so too, I said, and meant it. The rest of my week in Tel Aviv was extraordinary. I met with the Prime Minister's wife and discussed a commission. I had coffee with Savta Miriam, who showed me jewelry from her grandmother and told me stories about Jewish weddings in Brooklyn in the 1950s. I gave more interviews, met with buyers and collectors, and soaked in the success of my collection. On my last day, I visited the exhibition one final time. All but one of my pieces had sold, and that one was being held for a museum that wanted to add it to their permanent collection. Dahlia told me she'd never seen anything like it. "You've changed the game, Naomi," she said. "Next year you could show in Paris, Milan, New York. The world is open to you." Flying back to New York, I thought about the past week, about the revelation and confrontation and unexpected triumph. I'd set out to prove something to David and his family, but in the end, I'd proven something to myself, that I didn't need to hide who I was to be loved. That the right people would appreciate me as I am, and the wrong ones would reveal themselves through their dismissal. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Leah is telling everyone she always knew you were talented. Thought you'd appreciate the irony." I laughed and typed back. Some people rewrite history to avoid confronting their mistakes. True, but Savta Miriam is telling everyone the real story. She's your biggest fan now. Back in New York, my studio felt different, not because it had changed, but because I had. I was done hiding, done diminishing, done fitting myself into spaces that were too small. My calendar was already filling up with commission requests and exhibition opportunities. The Museum of Modern Art wanted to do a retrospective of my work. Fashion Week in Paris had sent an invitation for next season. And David and I texted occasionally, surface-level conversations about weather and work. He'd joined therapy, he told me, to work on his tendency to make assumptions and his discomfort with successful women. It was a start. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. 3 months later, I received a package at my studio. Inside was a small box with a note. "I finally understand what real jewelry looks like. D." Inside the box was a pendant he'd commissioned from another designer. Not as skilled as me, but competent. It was a sabra flower, different from mine, his own interpretation. The note continued, "I'm learning to see. It's harder than I thought. But I'm trying. Can we have coffee next week?" I held the pendant up to the light, watching it catch and scatter the sun. It wasn't perfect, but it was thoughtful. It was effort. It was the beginning of him actually trying to know me. I texted back, "Coffee sounds good." I didn't know if David and I would find our way back to each other. I didn't know if the person he was becoming could truly appreciate the person I'd always been. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again make myself small for anyone. Not for love, not for family, not for the comfort of people who preferred their own assumptions to the truth. I was Naomi Chen, internationally acclaimed jewelry designer. I was extraordinary. I was enough exactly as I was, and anyone who couldn't see that clearly wasn't worth dimming my light for. The sabra flower pendant from David found a place on my workbench, next to my tools and sketches. A reminder of the journey, from hiding to revelation, from accommodation to authenticity, from basic to brilliant. Some people called it revenge. I called it truth. And truth, I'd learned, was the most beautiful thing I could create. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.